Thanks for that generous introduction, and thanks for a few minutes this morning when I'd like to share with you a few thoughts about leadership. Have you heard of Truth Cathy? Anybody know who Truth Cathy, what he did? On Sundays you're reminded more particularly of Chick-fil-A because it's always closed. But Chick-fil-A was founded by a gentleman by the name of Truth Cathy. And I want to give you this book, Will, and I'm going to refer to Mr. Cathy in just a few minutes, especially as it relates to the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind. I hope you'll enjoy this because he gave me that just a few months ago when I visited with him, and that'll make some sense to you when I tell you the story. But I want to thank you for your commitment to leadership. I want to thank a gentleman that we were able to recruit here in his retirement, early retirement, when he retired from Mary University, and Dr. John Fleming. And he has surrounded himself with some outstanding people. But I would ask you, isn't this a great country? You know, think about it. We have millions of people who would love to come to this country. We don't have millions who are trying to leave. We have millions who are trying to come here. In just 3 weeks, several of us will go to China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And while we're in Vietnam, we'll have actually graduation. Troy's graduation will be held in mid-September in Vietnam. That's somewhat of an interesting transformation because for 10 years, from 1965 until 1975, we were actually doing battle in Vietnam. And now we're educating the youth of Vietnam and adults as well. That's transformation as it should be. I'll tell you, if we have time, I'll tell you a little story about our first graduation. We were the first American university to award the bachelor's degree in Vietnam 3 years ago, February 28, 2008. But it was President Reagan who made the comment, the greatest privilege on earth is being born an American citizen, for where else can people, regardless of their race, their sex, or their handicapping condition, literally aspire to be all that they have the potential to be. That's really one of the great opportunities that we have as Americans. But it was another American president more than 200 years ago who warned us about the delicate nature of this democracy. If you think about it, it's delicate. It's very delicate. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville, wondering why America would work, he came to this country and he said it hadn't worked anywhere else. Why would he work in America? When he came to this country, he went into the big cities and into the towns, the hamlets, and finally went into the churches. He said, at the conclusion of his journey, he said, America is great because America is good. And when America ceases to be good, it ceases to be great. And that's the American spirit. Nowhere else in the world do you see philanthropy, for example. People give as generously of themselves and their resources to other people. So America is really a blessed nation. But Thomas Jefferson said, our great challenge will be having enough principled leaders, vision and integrity, who can protect this delicate experiment that Tocqueville talks about. And it's still true. And I would say probably in my lifetime, we need leadership as much today, perhaps even more so, than we've ever needed leadership. Leadership is not something people naturally gravitate to. It's a lot more comfortable to be one of the people as opposed to being one of the leaders. That's why a number of years ago, about 15 years ago, we chose to create this Institute for Leadership Development that we recruited Dr. Klein to lead. It's why one of the first things he began looking at was bringing leadership activities to campus. Any girls, state, alumni in here? Yeah, we have a couple of great programs. And I don't know if you would have come to Troy had you not been to Girls State or not. But, I know when we began to host Girls State, we had 35 alumni from Girls State, and today we have over 200. Think about the difference just coming to this campus and becoming familiar. So we began to host those kinds of conferences. The Governor's Youth Leadership Forum for Disabled, Hobie, and my daughter Katie, who became an officer in the Air Force, she went to the Hugh O'Brien Leadership Program. And when we had always cultivated in her a sense of leadership and responsibility. But I think until she went to that experience as a junior in high school and somebody called her a leader, until then, I'm not sure she really viewed herself as a leader. But it began to crystallize in her mind and she could make a difference. And so she actually became the leader that we said she was. And that self-fulfilling prophecy is powerful. And I would say to each one of you, the only limitation you face, and however far you want to go in life, is the one you place on yourself. I'm satisfied that if a student can get into Troy University, a student can graduate from Troy University, if they're willing to work hard enough. And this is the first step on your journey to making a real difference in this world. I wanted to use the simple word lead, and I'm sensitive to time, and I think we have Dr. Klein until about 9:45. Is that
correct?
Is that right? So I'd like to make a few comments. I'd like to hear your questions or comments too. We don't monopolize the answers at Troy. We try to provide the answers. I hope in a thoughtful way and not just an impulsive way. But if you have a question, I'd like for you to ask me the question. So I don't want to do all the talking. I think that's why the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. I've never learned very much when I've talked, but I've learned a lot when I've listened. And that's one of the traits of a leader. I would encourage you to remember that. Remember why you have 2 of these and 1 of these. Is to listen to those people you serve. But I'm going to use this word lead, L-E-A-D, just as a framework. The L, lead from the front. I think one of the great experiences I had was early in my life, and Will reflected on that. I had the good fortune to serve as a platoon leader in the Marine Corps as a young man, and I think I've probably learned more in 13 months of Vietnam than I may have since that time about real leadership, because you learn to lead from the front. You know, it's comfortable perhaps leading from the heel to the rear, but that's not where real leaders operate. Another thing you learn as you go through life too is not to ask people to do certain things that you're not willing to do. I mean, setting that example in leadership is so critical. I mentioned listening and loyalty is not earned. I mean, given away, it's earned, and it's a two-way street. If you are loyal and faithful to those people who look to you for leadership, you experience their loyalty in return. And what is your definition of leadership? You probably haven't given a lot of thought to that, but I suspect one of the things that you'll be encouraged to think about is how do you define leadership? And I could ask you now, and every one of you would be right, because it's not one definition of leadership. You go to the literature, you'll see about 300 plus definitions of leadership. Over a lot of years that I've had an opportunity to reflect upon it, I've concluded for me, and it was Ben Franklin who said, brilliance is found in simplicity. So I would encourage you in communications, remember that if you can use 5 words, don't use 10. You can impress by using 10, but I think the real importance of communication is to inform. So if you can use 5 words and not 10, and I have reduced over time my definition of leadership to just, I guess, 4 words. It's the management of hope. That's my definition of leadership. because people who look to you for leadership are entrusting to you their hopes, their dreams, maybe their futures in many ways, maybe even their life. And that's why the management of hope, think about President Obama and the tremendous responsibility he has as the leader of this country. He was elected because people entrusted to him their hope for the future. His re-election will depend on whether he delivered that hope. And that's what all of us, when the Board of Trustees asked me to come to Troy in 1989, they entrusted to me the hopes and the dreams of this university. And my continued service to Troy University depended very directly on the ability to maintain that confidence, produce the hope and realization of their dreams that had been entrusted to me. And so I don't know how you'll define leadership. I wanted to share with you my simple definition of leadership. It's important that we keep things simple so the Chancellor can understand them, and that's why I've distilled my definition to those few words. The E could stand for enthusiasm. If you're in a student organization, I noticed there were several leaders here this morning, and I suspect one of the common threads through that fabric that they were weaving was enthusiasm. Have you ever wanted to follow anybody who was not enthusiastic? Not me. I want people to be passionate about what they do. And I really believe that in this world, leadership is putting the mission first, but people always. I often say, and some of you may have heard me say this, the most important thing we do at Troy University is serve students. And let me go back to the foundation of that. It says in the book of Matthew, I came to serve and not to be served. You know, leadership is not about a parking place that's closer to the building. Leadership is not about a bigger tent. Leadership is not about an executive dining room. Leadership is not about the perks. Leadership in its purest form is about service. Service. And I suspect over the next several weeks, you're going to hear a lot about servant leadership, which in my estimation is the best form of leadership. Servant leadership. Being willing to step in and make a difference in this world by serving others. And that's what I think is so important. We had a simple saying, too, Bill, and speaking of the eat, the leader eats last. That's a simple way of remembering that you take care of the people who follow you, who look to you, who have entrusted to you the dreams and aspirations of their future. You know, and you have to get to the end of the chow line and not in the front. Let me say this, too, about the E, ethics. Ethics. 30 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Drew Cathy. Mr. Cathy had befriended one of our students who was on a plane who was both deaf and blind. And this young man really had a difficult time traversing the airport, getting on his plane. And Mr. Cathy is he's now about 90 and still is involved with the same Sunday school class he taught 60 years ago, for those 60 years. And when you walk into his corporate headquarters in South Atlanta, you feel the spirit of Drew Cathy. I mean, he has 2,000 employees working in the corporate headquarters. But you know, it's often said that the shadow of an institution never exceeds the shadow of its leader. And the spirit of the leadership will be reflected in the spirit of the people. And when I walked through Chick-fil-A, I could feel Truett Cathy. The Truett Cathy I've got to know. Because when he befriended this young man at the Institute for Deaf and Blind, unfortunately, some months after they met, we lost that young man. He died of very, very premature death. And Mr. Cathy came to the memorial service. And we developed a relationship. He was very helpful to us there. And when I came to Troy in '89, we continued it. And he's even has an honorary doctorate. The first thing you see when you go into his office is an honorary doctorate from Troy University. I'm very proud of him. He's been very generous financially to Troy over the years. And so when I went in to see him, not to raise money, although it's not uncommon in a position like mine to be in, to beg somebody for something all the time, whether it's a legislature or a private donor or whatever. But it was just really a trip of friendship to see him. And he was telling me about that book, and this is his most recent book, Will, that I've given to you. He was telling me about an experience that reflects ethics. He was invited to a congressional committee in the wake of Enron and Health South and some of these corporate scandals that all of you have read about. And they invited him to appear before this committee to talk about business ethics. And so when he got there, the committee chairman, sitting on the dais, gave him this remarkable introduction. Well, if you know Mr. Cathy, you know what a humble man he is. And he was really embarrassed by all the things that the committee chairman said about him. And finally, the committee chairman said, and now Mr. Cathy will tell us about business ethics. And Mr. Cathy just sat there. Silence is deafening. And finally, the committee chairman said, Mr. Cathy, are you going to tell us about business ethics? And Mr. Cathy said, no, sir. He said, I don't know a thing about business ethics. And the committee chairman was taken back. What do you do at that point? He said, you don't. And there was a pause, and Mr. Cathy said, no, sir. He said, but if it's personal ethics we're talking about, I can give you my opinion because I don't separate business ethics from personal ethics. He said, I believe that what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. You know, I think that's a powerful testimony. And I would encourage you to take Mr. Cathy's perspective. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Too often in life, and especially in our politically driven environment, we find that fine line to justify our indiscretions, perhaps. But I really believe that your conscience is your best guide, and most of you have a strong, if not all of you have a strong conscience. You know when you've done the right thing. And let that be your guide, as Mr. Cathy would do. And I was talking about the pervasive atmosphere where you feel truth, Cathy. I walked up to the receptionist and she said, have a blessed day. I walked into his office and his secretary gave me a similar response. You can feel the leadership. The leadership is part of it. Affects the culture of an organization. The A, you will hear me say this if you haven't heard me say this already, but you'll especially hear me say this at graduation. And I know all of you are going to graduate, right? I know that this group will graduate. The A, in my estimation, the most important dimension of that A is attitude. Attitude. And what you'll hear me say at graduation is that research, year in and year out, continues to prove and validate that 90% of the people in America every year who lose their job, they don't lose their job because they can't do their job. They lose their job because of a bad attitude. That's true. That is so true. Most people are capable, if they're able to get a job, they're capable of doing the job. It's that attitude. And if that's true about losing a job, what's true about being promoted and advancing a profession, person? Attitude, as it's said so often, determines altitude. And if you have a view in a leadership role, and you view that glass as half full and not half empty, you will be on the right path to making a difference in this world. Because the only thing that stands between you and success generally is hard work. And so I would encourage you to remember that A word, and then the D, because I'm about to run out of time. The D is, in my estimation, direction. You know, and let me encourage you, and I know most of us don't think too far beyond the end of the semester. I've got to get through this semester, and I've got to do well in my grades. And, you know, what's your long-term vision? That's the D, is direction. It was Henry David Thoreau who said, it really doesn't matter what you're looking at, It's what you see that counts. Now, some of you may have seen the strip mall that stands about a block from here that has the corporation CGI on the building, where we took an old strip mall and turned it into a high-tech center. You may not recognize what I'm talking about. It's there, though, that we took an old strip mall that was closed, literally. There were a few old stores there. And it was within a block of campus, but I can see the day when our campus extends beyond that strip mall. And so we wanted to buy the 5 acres that the strip mall sat on. And we really didn't know at this point in time that there would be an international software engineering firm that would look at Troy. And they were looking at cities all over the country. And when they came to Troy, we took them to that old strip mall. And I told the CEO of that corporation the same thing that I just told you. I said, remember Thoreau's comment when he said, it doesn't really matter what you're looking at, it's what you see. I said, I don't want you to see this old strip mall. I want you to see this transformation, these beautiful buildings where you could work. And they made the decision to come to Troy. We invested about $7 million, transformed, added new space, and today CGI employs 300 people with there with a potential to do a lot more. And on the other end of the strip mall, we have our IT and our eTroy that is housed there. And so we saw the transformation, but it goes back to having a vision. And I wanted to leave you with, what is your vision? Where are you going in life? Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there. So I think it's really important in life to have direction. It's like an ocean voyage. If you know generally where you're going, you probably get there. But if you don't know where that light is on that distant shore, you may wind up anywhere. So it's really important. Make good decisions and take that high road. Remember that in this society, and I'm still encouraged, in spite of all the challenges we face in this society, that the most important leadership dimension and quality is integrity. Now, I don't know, have I already talked past our one question? Is there one question that I could respond to before we adjourn and you go on to your assignment? Yeah.
What is one quality that you believe is like undervalued leadership? People always say that have direction, things like that. What is one thing that you think people undervalue?
I go back to what I said about mission first, people always. We are in the business of dealing with people. You have to remember that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that care, that culture of caring is so critically important. People will follow you anywhere if they know that you care about them and their future. So we don't hear that enough. We hear it, but we don't hear it enough. The other last thing I would mention, communications. Communications. I'm not sure that you can be an effective leader if you can't communicate. So all of you, please work hard on your writing skills, your speaking skills, be able to communicate to others what your vision and your hopes and your dreams include. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed year. Thank you.